you can say, the only reason you can say no is because you have a way bigger vision, or you have these priorities that you know are important. So you can say no. But if you don't have that, you're going to say yes, and you're just going to, kind of do what comes your way. You're just like, yes, okay. Because you want to help other people. Obviously you want, if somebody goes like, can you help me during this time, but it's inconvenient for you, generally, like, even I would say yes, because like I'm like, yeah, I want to help you, but then it impacts the rest of like momentum in your day or whatever else you're trying to accomplish. You do that enough, and I think you start to feel like I can't afford to say yes all the time.
Well, welcome back. Welcome back to Athlete's Pursuit.
Episode number 2. This would be number 2.
It's number 2?
Well, we did the intro, which doesn't count.
Mm-hmm.
And then we did number 1.
Yeah.
So yeah, if my math is correct.
You have good math. It's the third recording, second episode.
Indeed.
And today is so fitting because something we have to always do every single day. One is really help ourselves recover. Let me pull this closer to my mouth so we can sound a little more clear. But we want to make sure that we're recovering from these intense days and workouts that we have going on. But it's not as easy as people think.
It's really not.
Yeah. And I think the biggest thing is that we're not always recovering from just a workout. We're recovering from so many things. And maybe it's the city we live in. And I would argue probably not. It's so many other things in life when we have family and we have finances and we have work struggles and achievements. But we need to recover from a lot of these moments. And I'm actually really curious to learn more about someone like you who is so self-reflective, who knows themselves pretty darn well, I'd say.
Thank you.
And you might not agree, but I think just from the outside, it looks like you do really well with all that. I want to understand how you truly kind of dissociate from all the things that are going on in your life, because there's a lot.
Ooh, man.
Right? And so I think we're talking about things like being someone who's very kind of like an introvert. I think it takes, I would argue that recovery period from life, from workouts, all of that together, there's a lot more involved in it.
There is. It's a lot of self-awareness, definitely. I think you mentioned that I'm an introvert, which I don't know if that shocks some people to learn, but I recharge by going a little bit more internal most of the time. So there's somewhat of a principle that I started to adopt that is about the law of, you've heard about the law of attraction, but like the law of detachment. So
don't know that one.
All right. So it's like a psychological kind of principle. And I learned it from, there's a great philosopher I always refer to. His name is Alan Watts. And he talks about participation in life, right? You're fully immersed, you're present, you're experiencing life, yet you are still detached from it, which means that you're not attached to a certain result, to a person, to a job, to a career, to an outcome. So you're participating, but there's like a detachment from the experience at the same time, because you understand that all of life is kind of transient and just flows. So learning that is helped me out a bunch to learn how to recover and learn, whatever is happening in life that we can't control, you can let go of and know, hey, what's meant for me is going to be around. What's not is going to leave as it should. What enters and comes in and comes out it's just a natural way of things. So this recovery and kind of getting away from, I think, all of the stressors that happen in our life, some of it is knowing that. The other part for me is understanding that, going back to what you said earlier, is that I'm an introvert. So I have felt guilty in the past, and I know you are too. So I wonder if you feel the same way. And I think we've kind of had conversations, you and I, just ourselves about this, but we are in a world, I feel like, where when you have a day off, and typically Saturday, Sunday, you have a day off, like time off, right? Instead of just resting, where like ideally as an introvert, I just want to be by myself or with a small group of friends, right? With a book, or like honestly playing a video game or going to the gym by myself, like slowing pace down, less people, less interaction, even less conversing. I don't even want to talk that much, or just not have to be on, I guess. I feel like we live in kind of a more extroverted world where people want to fill that free time with we're going to go here. We're going to do this. We're going to go to that event, go to that concert, go here, go there. And I always find that kind of hard because I have to say no to that stuff. And then I used to feel bad about it. I'd be like, oh man, like I'm saying no to an experience or something like that. Right.
Yeah, you feel there is guilt and almost shame in all of that. You feel as if you're going to miss out on something, or you're not supporting your friends by not being there.
Right.
Yeah, I have this. I definitely am. And let's also set up why people might think that we aren't introverts. And I think that it's okay to say that we could be both. But
yes, for sure.
Like I do enjoy being on camera. I do enjoy speaking my mind. I do enjoy being up in front of a crowd. But if I could have an escape hatch that just allows me to then just like completely veg out for hours, like give me my hour in the spotlight, and then give me my time to decompress.
Retreat.
Like, let me just run away. Like, I don't want to say goodbye. I don't want to sign autograph. What am I sounding like? That's not what I'm trying to get at.
You signed an autograph?
But no. But what I'm really trying to say is that I don't want to stick around for the conversation after. Like, even if it's going to be like a dinner party or it's going to be a family event, I'm like, I gave my all during that event.
Wow.
I don't need this now. Cause like, and sometimes my all probably doesn't seem all that great, but that's all I have to give, right? And I don't feel like having this happens with my in-laws. They have that traditional Italian goodbye where you basically say goodbye 17 times.
Oh yeah,
and so it takes like 3 hours, and there is something very warm and welcoming and loving about that kind of thing. But for me, I feel like I can feel my anxiety kind of rising. My retreat is becoming even more aggressive. I'm trying to get away, and it looks like me. I'm just trying to be like, I don't like you. Get away from me. I'm not. I'm just like, I'm so glad for the time we had, but I gotta go.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Where other people, it's like, I feel like I look at that and I'm thinking they just want to spend more time together. But I don't know if they do. I just know that I enjoyed my time with them, and now I'm ready to kind of just go back. I'll be back when we, have another event. But give me my time.
Again.
Yeah.
I relate to this heavy for sure. There's definitely, I don't think that there is such a thing as a pure introvert, as a pure extrovert. Like I think we're always like a mix of both. It's just kind of what do you identify with, right? Like an introvert traditionally responds like more stimulus is not really what you need. Like you want a little bit less input, right? Because we're very introspective. And so generally speaking, the introvert recovers in solitude. That's just kind of general. I think the definition. And an extrovert obviously wants more stimulus and they get charged up by that. So it's kind of like what fills your battery up, right? So I'm the same way. And, I can still, obviously as a fitness coach, like you're kind of on stage to a degree.
Sure.
You're out there, you're performing, but that has
literally, you really are performing, right? You have a mic on, you're up there, you got to have the energy, right?
You do have to have but it has purpose. So like, I think that's the thing. Introvert, like I don't like small talk very much. I got to have some type of purpose. So when you go into those family examples that you're talking about, if I'm in a family party and we're just like talking about the weather, like if, I love my mom, but like when we get on the phone and she goes, how's the weather out there? I'm like, yo, what are we doing?
Yeah,
we're talking about the
weather,
clouds?
the weather, politics, and money. Whenever someone starts talking about that, and it becomes this small talk, right? Just these pleasantries. I'm like, it doesn't like. I feel like I'm wasting my time now.
Right
now, this is a really good because I'd love to talk about this in a future episode, which I think is relationship building.
Okay.
And I think that sometimes those pleasantries and those kind of things, they actually, it really is necessary. I think to kind of feel out the situation, feel out a relationship, where to go in a conversation, like what is this person like, what don't they like. I think it's kind of necessary in some way. Now, I don't feel like I'm very good at developing or even keeping relationships. I am someone who really, I didn't really think we were going to go this direction in this conversation, but like I burn bridges pretty easily. If someone ends up crossing me, I usually do kind of hold that grudge for longer than I want to. And this is all something I would love to work on. But it's, so developing the relationships, coming back, I think that it's necessary to kind of go through those. So to cut that off so quickly, I think is not good. So now if we're talking about being an introvert, sometimes I'm like, do I have to be here for this? Do we have to be talking about this? And sometimes I have that guilt and I'm like, I think I need to. So if we're basically talking about having to recharge and take time away, I'm now keeping myself in a position that I don't enjoy because I think I need to. And now I'm probably coming off as the wrong person because it's like, I think we're talking about the weather, but he seems angry.
Well, okay. All right. Well, so I'm going to go back to what you said about like cutting off relationships or burning a bridge kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's obviously going to depend on the circumstance, but I do the same thing. I tend to have and I've gotten more this way as I've gotten older too, and less apologetic about it, where if I just don't vibe with you, or if the energy is draining me down, or if you have, like, to your point, crossed me or lied to me, it's very difficult to come back. Like, you have all of my trust. I'm going to give you all of my focus and attention until you, for some reason, make it to where you just burned it pretty much. And then it's hard to come back. It's hard for me to come back from that. I don't think that that's a bad thing, really, because I think you can only have first of all, you only have so much attention and so much focus and so much energy. So I'm very protective of it. Right. And I have my close circle. And the older I get too, I think you realize that you should have a close, small circle. I don't want a lot of relationships because I don't think that there's depth in breadth, right? Like, I want depth and substance. So I have my core people and I trust them implicitly, wholeheartedly. And you kind of get this good energy exchange from them, right? Like, I can say that about you. Like, when we have our conversations, it's like an energizing conversation, right? It's intellectual. I think we both get something from it, right? And I have that with my brother and a couple other close friends. But to maintain relationships with many, I think is impossible. I think I've heard, even as a human being, like, psychologically, we're only really able to have 5 close, kind of intimate, close relationships, right? Whether they be, those intimate relationships with a partner or your best friend, your close relatives, and like whoever that is for you. So I think that's okay. I think when we go back to balancing work and rest, some of this recharging stuff that we're talking about, I think this is part of it, is knowing yourself and kind of being okay with shutting other people down so that you can energize yourself. Because I have struggled with that, where I've allowed everybody in.
Yeah.
And then I cannot recharge. Then I'm like always getting depleted.
Yeah.
And then who's winning there? Like, I can't perform at a high level then.
You have nothing to give after that.
No.
And I think that there are people, and let me just kind of layer on top where I know I struggle with this, is that my wife, I believe she recharges completely the opposite. She definitely likes her alone time, but she is very much an extrovert in the way of wanting to be around people and having multiple conversations and having multiple friends and multiple friendships. That's just how she grew up. I think it's how her culture. She would laugh if she heard me just say that, but it's something where, she just grew up with a lot of friends, a lot of family around. And so for her to be able to maybe try to recharge from work or recharge from challenges in her life, she wants to bring those people in. I think that's amazing. But that's where I know we, in a very close environment, have a really hard time, where I'm like, tough. I need to retreat. And she's like, I want to talk. So
tough.
Now this struggle that you're talking about with the, like, friends and stuff, I think it's maybe easier. I want to speak for anyone that's single out there. I think it's easier as a single person to do that.
Well, yeah, because you can literally say after dinner, I'm going to go home, and then you're going home, right?
Yeah.
But when you're in a relationship and living with the person, you're creating a life, obviously, together. This is going to be, I could see this being a very big challenge. I think I would have a hard time with this.
It is a challenge, but you know what? There's so many great things that come from it. And I'm not just kind of, blowing smoke up people's butts here by saying this, but there are great things that we can really see from, me being pushed to not be so introverted, and then watch her end up kind of allowing the introvert to kind of be myself. And I so appreciate that. I think with everything around recovery, It's challenging, right? And so you can end up going into recovery from, you think of it scientifically from the nutrition standpoint, from the, training periodization standpoint, but we're not even there yet. We're still talking about how to actually take time for yourself.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the hardest piece. Training, like I know we're going to go back into this. Training recovery, I think, is actually pretty easy. It seems
exactly.
really straightforward.
Yeah.
This stuff is way more difficult. I find it way more difficult because there's also a part, I've been reading, I've been going into this book. I think I've mentioned to you once, called Quiet by Susan Cain. It is about,
you've mentioned it. You made it sound good.
It's about being an introvert and pretty much the power of that. And she even mentions that there's this, you feel guilty or she felt guilty in her early years for being an introvert because you're kind of taught in this society to be an extrovert, right? To be outgoing, to go to networking events, to mingle at dinners, right? To talk to people. And of course there's benefit in it, right? And she'll say in this book, like, of course there's benefit to working in teams and to working in groups and to, in learning salesmanship, right? And influencing people there is. But it's almost like we diminished the power or what it means to be an introvert too, that let's not apologize anymore that if you recharge by being alone, that should just be completely okay. That it should be completely fine for you to say no to dinner and choose a book instead. Or instead of going on a vacation trip with a bunch of people, in the Bahamas, maybe you just want to get a cabin by yourself and read some books. That should be completely okay.
Yes.
Bottom line. But for whatever reason, I think we feel internally guilty. I know I've had this internal struggle with it, but I'm just learning to say yes to the things that just make me feel good so that I can, perform at my best. And it is what it is, so you just adopt those things.
Yep. I think that you do a really good job of kind of accepting that. I can almost see you growing as I've known you. And being able to accept yourself more.
Oh, this is interesting. Really?
Yeah, I think it's been a good little thing because I think from when I first saw you, especially on that training side, I think I did see there was a breaking point. I think at one time, I think you were very open about it. In fact, right? I think on social media. It's like, you need this time away. I remember you throwing stuff, but it was the first time I think in your new environment that it happened.
Yeah.
Right. You had to have some conversations.
Yep.
Yeah. I thought it was a very good way. So I think stepping up for yourself and realizing, hey, you need to have these conversations with the people around you. You can't just maybe fight, work against all of these kind of things. You have to make sure that you are allowing people to understand who you are.
Yeah.
Right.
It's very true.
Like you with work and having to go in there and be like, hey, I'm Joe. This is how I'm going to be able to give my complete self to, work. This is what I need from you guys. Same thing with a relationship. And this, what I mentioned about my marriage, this is not something, I don't believe that her and I, because we went through a lot of things. I'd love to share those later, but we went through a lot of things where maybe we didn't actually get a chance to see some of these moments where I am the introvert and how I recharge and how she is the extrovert. I think we knew it, but we didn't really know how it plays into life long term.
So how are you handling this? I mean, is it as simple as just communicating like, hey, I just need this time alone tonight, and you take that and you just simply say that and you have that time? Or is it as simple as just communicating what you need? It sounds simple, but the execution is always different. How are you guys handling it, I guess?
My execution probably isn't the way to do it. I feel like I do still bring myself to these breaking points where I don't end up communicating very effectively, and then it kind of like, it just comes out and I'm like, I gotta get away. And it's like, no, okay, well, we could have figured this out maybe 10 minutes earlier, right? If you just kind of told me what you need. But I think this is a good transition into our larger topic, our larger conversation right now about how we can really make sure that we are kind of balancing things, right? So balancing, I think we talk about a work-life balance.
Sure.
Right. And, if marriage is life and, the work that we do with our clients and our members, that is our work, right? How do we actually balance those things? And so you're asking about kind of my marriage. And so I think we can break these down not only into just work life, but I think work and life, right? Because I think both can be kind of tough. So I think if we're going into things like life, just I think being able to make sure that you kind of know where your values are and where you've kind of set your intention. For myself, I know that my intention is to, continue to be an amazing dad and to continue to work on being a better husband. And then work on being a good son, work on being a good brother, and work on maybe trying to kind of fulfill my life through travel, through, meeting new people if I definitely can, all those kind of things there. And so making sure that I understand if that's my intention, then where do I end up kind of organizing that? Mm-hmm. And I think I need to make sure that I'm setting up boundaries and allowing those times to actually, be set almost in my quote unquote schedule. I think it's important to really make sure that you set time aside. You can't just let it be a passive thing. Okay, I'm going to be a good dad today and then not think about how you're going to do it.
Yeah.
Right. I think that you actually have to, and I think people think that it sounds crazy, but I think it's good to schedule in, okay, maybe that's playtime with the kids. This is going to be dinner time. Like actually schedule it, put it on your calendar, make it a hard start and stop if you need to.
Sure.
I think that people think no, it'll just work itself out. But I think that especially when it comes to life, you do need to schedule those things. You can't just you can't think it's just going to happen.
No.
And it usually gets away from you. And I think that kind of then plays into work because a lot of us, I know maybe I'm just talking, personally here, but I think that work becomes something that can really take over your whole day. So the things that you wanted to do, be a good dad, be a better husband, that ends up almost being taken over by the thing that is going to be bringing in money. The thing that likely I'm hoping most people can say that they're passionate about.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that you need to make sure that you're kind of setting these boundaries, scheduling times. I think that can definitely help. It's a good start, at least, without kind of listing, here are your bullet points. This is exactly what you can do. You have to think about it that way just a little bit.
Yeah, you do. I think this work-life balance thing is, it's always a common question, and I find it very difficult because I don't know if it exists, right? I don't know. I think you're always kind of playing with, I rest more this time. I have work more this time. It's always just this constant flux with things. Mm-hmm. One, I think understanding that there's going to be a constant flux is kind of a huge, helps a bunch, I think. I also, and this is, we'll talk about priorities in it here in a second, but there's also just these phases where you're going to work a little bit more during certain times, certain seasons of your life, and you're going to rest a little bit more during certain seasons of your life. Something that helps me a little bit is understanding some of the experiences that I had when I'm working a lot. Right now, we've been working so much, quarantine. We're trying our best to, adapt during this time, right? And we're all doing our best. We're all scrambling and moving. And, sometimes it can burn you out. Be like, man, I'm working so much right now, right? But I always go back to this thing where when I was in Cape Town, when I lived in Cape Town for 6 months, I had no job. I had I was modeling and stuff, but these things are, sporadic. So I had all this free time on my hands. And in the beginning, it's amazing because you're I can just spend the day however I want. And that's a beautiful thing, of course, right? I could go hiking in the morning. If I felt like going to get dinner that night at a certain spot, I'll just go. I go to the beach one day and it's hey, I don't have plans. You want to go do this? And it's yeah, I'll just go with the flow, right? Now, how beautiful is that? It's great. However, I remember that even that got boring, right? So some of this for me with work-life balance type of thing is just a perspective of knowing that there really isn't this perfect kind of zone. You might be in a great zone at certain spots in your life, but too much of one thing, you're always going to miss the other. So I'm on the beach one day and I'm thinking, man, I've been doing this for 4 months. I really want to be challenged and do some work. I want to be pushed. I want to be in a grind. I want to be in a routine. So I'm on the beach and I'm missing work. And now I'm at work and I'm missing the beach, right?
Yeah.
There's always this thing, the grass is greener kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I'm always kind of remembering that and putting that back into perspective too.
Joe, what would the perfect day in Cape Town, South Africa have been?
I had many of these days. It was, for me, it was waking up with a cup of coffee. I would go for a hike onto Lion's Head to see the sunrise. So you would see this dramatic sunrise, even have coffee on the side of this mountain.
I really hope we can put some background music to this.
I got to.
This would be amazing.
It was obviously great, and walk back down. I would grab some lunch at this perfect, at the time I was vegan, so I found this great vegan burger spot, and I love their food. So I would get a vegan burger for lunch, and then I would go for a jog along the promenade. So it was this beautiful running trail along the ocean coast, and take me right to the gym where I would go into weightlifting, and then go to another vegan burger spot that was right next to that gym, and walk back home through Greenpoint in Cape Town, which is this beautiful walking path, like just absolutely gorgeous park. And then maybe have some wine to see the sunset. And I had that day many times.
That's amazing. Was anyone else involved in this?
Sometimes, but often I did this alone. Yeah. Or they were there for pieces. Like I'd meet you at the gym, or I'd meet you for a run, or I'd meet you at the beach, or meet you for the hike. But it would be, some days I would just do this by myself.
That sounds pretty perfect.
I loved it.
I gotta be honest.
Very relaxing.
Have you been able to recreate that here in New York?
Not really.
No.
No.
It's not like you can get up, enjoy your coffee, overlooking
No.
Dumbo.
No. It's a little bit harder.
Taking the nice walk on the promenade over in Brooklyn Heights.
Yeah, it's tough.
And then taking a little stroll across Brooklyn Ridge. I feel like you could recreate it in some way.
You could in some
It's
ways.
a lot more people and
a lot more people.
scenic in a different way.
Don't you find that just the energy of the city causes like a different sensation? Like you could, to your point, I could probably maybe recreate that day, but just I feel like the energy of the city makes me feel just different about my day too.
For sure. I feel there's a speed to the city, right? The people are always kind of moving, and especially in this area, is that you actually have a mix of, you have tourists and you also have people that are trying to get to work. So you do get even more complicated in terms of like how you're trying to navigate around. It's hard, right?
Yes, it
and
is.
Even trying to get from one spot to the other. Are you going to walk? Are you going to bike? Are you going to end up taking the train? Do you have to take an Uber? Like, what do you do?
It's a fight.
There's traffic. It's like there's so much thought that goes into everything.
There really is,
right? And it really it grinds on you.
I don't think people understand that going to get groceries is like a huge deal here. It takes a lot of work.
I feel like you have to be a project manager for not just your life, your day. You're like, okay, if I drive over there and I drive back, what am I going to do? Where am I going to park the car? I don't really understand. Am I wearing my mask? Where's my mask? Okay, let me just jump out of here. Okay, good. Okay, sanitizer, got my sanitizer. Okay, where am I going to go now? Am I going to go to Whole Foods or go to Trader Joe's? Oh, Trader Joe's, the line's going to be so long. Whole Foods, the line's less long, but it might be more expensive. And it just ends up becoming like, it's a lot.
It's a lot of logistics.
Right? I don't know if it's adulting. I think it's just like adulting on steroids.
In New York, yeah, probably. Because I remember grocery shopping in Charlotte, and it used to just be like I would just take my car and go, and I was in and out. But over here, it's like, yeah, we're at Trader Joe's, and it's like, oh, well, for me to get from Trader Joe's to Dumbo is going to take 30 minutes by subway, but then I'm going to have to take these bags on the subway to get over here. But if I take the ferry, it's going to take 40 minutes. If I take an Uber, it's $25. Is it worth it today? And it's just like a whole thing.
Yeah.
It's a whole thing.
And if you can see behind us, it's raining right now.
Right.
And that rain makes a difference in the day. You're like,
space,
it
bro.
shuts things down, and you're like, I can't do that now. That was a more enjoyable way to do it. So now any way I do, I'm going to not enjoy.
So we're always dealing with this.
Come to New York. It's a great city.
So I know we're going to talk about this a little bit more next week to give these guys like a sneak peek a little bit, but like the stressors that you don't even realize that are hitting you from just your environment. Right?
Yeah.
Like just the fact of being in New York is probably causing more stress because of the environment we're around versus Cape Town. The environment you're around is way more relaxing.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Much more of a chill vibe. So it just puts you in a different headspace. And it's like, are you factoring that in to how you're resting and recovering? Because it is a factor. But how much? It's always going to be this battle. But I think we have to understand this is where it probably leads into priorities, because like the work and rest, it's always going to be there. I think it's always going to be a battle, and we understand that. So then how do you prioritize certain things is the next question. And so, prioritizing, is it like, do you have a process for how you prioritize kind of not just your day, but maybe themes for your year? Ryan, do you have certain things that you kind of like a process you go through?
Ask me in a different way. What do you mean?
Do you have like what are your top priorities that help you say no to distractions?
Okay, got it. So I think I I'm still learning myself a lot, and I think I'm really behind on this. If someone says, "What do you really like?" I don't always know, but I know maybe what maybe makes me feel good, and I'm learning to trust my gut a little bit more.
It's a big one.
So certain things that make me feel good will be, spending a little bit more time outside than inside, making sure that I can kind of go through some sort of these rituals throughout my day. So I know that I prefer to get up earlier than later. I know that I prefer to spend a little bit of time by myself earlier in the day than later. I know that I want to make sure that I'm getting some sort of activity in. I want to make sure that I feel like I've taken care of, my dog. I want to make sure that I've spent time with my daughter. So now you might kind of see where I'm kind of ranking these things. Not that my daughter comes last there, obviously, but it's something where when I get up in my day, I really think about my non-negotiables. And I start to think about the habits that are going to make me feel good and are going to set me up to feel relaxed and be able to recover later in the day. If I get up late, I'm not able to work on the things that I wanted to that are going to make my business successful, that are going to make my relationships successful. If I feel like I didn't take care of my dog, right? All these things, by the end of the day, they build up. And now I feel almost like a failure and I can't spend my time sleeping. Right. And recovering. So my rituals are really kind of built around those non-negotiables of like, this is who I want to be. And it's really just, it's driven by my values. So I like to set up my morning, what I kind of call my magic time. My magic time is when I'm more creative, I'm more focused. And my intention is to get these things done so that I then can rest later in the day. And I can spend more time focusing on my daughter, continuing being an amazing dad, and continuing to work on being a better husband.
That's cool.
Right? So maybe being available for dinner, cooking dinner, doing more cleaning, and all those things too, right? If my apartment's not clean, I don't feel like I'm successful, right? I'm not actually able to be as creative. So all of these things kind of line up. So I really find that I very much value my early morning. I value, my clean apartment. I value kind of taking care of things. I value really tapping into my mind. So I just heard someone say this yesterday, that they have to do a really good job of protecting their calendar. And that doesn't mean that you have to actually schedule those things, but you have to protect yourself in terms of making sure that if someone says, hey, maybe one of my clients does want to schedule really early morning because that's all they have, and we have to kind of work on our next steps. I have to say, you know what, well, that's going to really affect my later in the day. I have to protect myself and I have to say no to you. Because I know it's going to be so important, and you have to be able to say no to that kind of thing.
Big point.
But maybe be able to say no in a different kind of way, right? And if you end up feeling like you have a purpose behind it, instead of like, I don't feel like it, like it's not that. I'm not saying I don't feel like talking with you early in the day. I'm saying that I'm prioritizing myself, and that's just helping me then recover better towards the end of the day and work on all those things I want to.
Yes, dude. I'm going to say this quote because you just led into it and I love it. It goes, you have to decide what your highest priorities are and have the courage pleasantly, smilingly, non-apologetically to say no to other things. And the way you do that is by having a bigger yes burning inside. The enemy of the best is often the good. I think about that all the time. And it's pretty much what you just said. You can say, the only reason you can say no is because you have a way bigger vision or you have these priorities that you know are important. So you can say no. But if you don't have that, you're going to say yes, and you're just going to, kind of do what comes your way. You're just like, yes, okay. Because you want to help other people. Obviously you want, if somebody goes like, can you help me during this time, but it's inconvenient for you, generally, like, even I would say yes, because like I'm like, yeah, I want to help you. But then it impacts the rest of like momentum in your day or whatever else you're trying to accomplish. You do that enough, and I think you start to feel like I can't afford to say yes all the time. Mm-hmm. Like you can't afford it. You lose so much momentum, and like for you to say no, you have to have these priorities lined up, which is something you have to figure out. Nobody's going to figure that out for you. What really matters and what you're trying to accomplish. It has to be as clear as you can make it. And then something that I want to go back to too is like, we're talking about time allotments, right? And you mentioned things like, where, you said, you made a joke of like, my daughter's like kind of like lower on the list kind of a thing when you were rattling it off. But it does, just because of time. And Tom Bilyeu said this. He's like, family's my highest priority, but it's not my highest time allotment. Right. And it's like, well, how can that be? right? Like maybe work is probably your highest time allotment, I would guess, but it's probably not your highest priority. Like I'm sure family is your highest priority, right? So that's okay too, right? Like where you're spending your time, you might have to spend more time on a certain aspect of life, but it doesn't necessarily correlate to being your highest priority all the time, right? So these priorities, like for me, training is like a number one for me. And because I know that like I have to have that to feel good. So like training and having that at the highest level for me is like what optimizes my performance. And then I have to have like certain initiatives that like I do each day. And it can just be one thing. It can be one thing that I'm moving the needle forward on for my future. That's for me. Because I think we have jobs, like a lot of us will have a job that you're working for somebody else or you're working for somebody else's vision. And so you're going to have to do certain things throughout the day that is, for that company, for that business. And that's great. You got to execute on those. But at the same time, I always make sure I promise myself that one simple thing, and sometimes it's more, right, than this because I got momentum, but I'm doing one thing to move the needle forward on something I'm passionate about, whether it be like a side project that I'm working on or some creative idea that I have, some 5-year vision for myself. And I think that makes all the difference too, because progress usually is something that just makes us happy. It fuels us. So that's kind of helps me kind of prioritize certain things.
I'm trying to say this with kind of around work, and some people, it's trying to stay within that one category of how do you balance work. Now we're balancing work, we're balancing life. But I think with around the kind of thing of saying, no, I want to make sure I brought this up as well, is that when people start talking about, well, how do you turn something down or no to not take that on as a project? When someone asks me like, well, how do you know if you should take a client on or not? Or how do you know if, working on social media is more important than writing a blog or, taking care of these small tasks? I think making sure that you really define your hourly value is going to be so important. And if you really feel like you're doing tasks in your life that aren't really creating more future value, you have to be honest with yourself and say, maybe this is something that I can either delegate out, get someone else to do.
Yeah.
Right. So I know that, let's say, accounting, I'm not great at it. And so I can do it. I can sit down, I can keep running through my numbers every single month, and I can look at my taxes and I can do my taxes. But is that actually going to make me money? Is that going to help me out? Because now that's taking time away from working with potential clients.
Yeah.
Or creating social media that maybe can get me more clients. So I'm now going to outsource that. Or maybe it's website design. I can keep working on my website and I can make it look exactly the way I want to, but is that now going to reduce, is that going to match up with what my hourly value is?
Right.
I need to now make sure that I'm kind of focusing on helping myself work on the things that are going to bring the most value to me.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, I think that I heard an example a long time ago about, someone trying to, maybe even we can think of value in terms of, valuable time with your family if you want to, or valuable time with your business, whatever you want. But let's put someone in the environment of a house with a yard, and you have to mow your lawn. If you know it's going to take you an hour, and that you normally are going to make, let's say, $600 an hour, and you can pay someone to mow your lawn for $40 an hour. It's going to be more advantageous for you to pay that person $40 to mow your lawn and go make the $600. That just makes more sense.
Sure.
I'm sure you can take on those. Like, you might be passionate about mowing your lawn. You love it, right? But it's and then you can do that. But if those start to add up, those things that kind of devalue you, you have to make sure that you start to make some decisions.
Yeah, sure.
And I think that's how people can kind of balance the work side of it. You want to set your hourly value or your value of anything.
Well, I think those decisions become a lot easier when you understand what you're working towards. So you have that priority set in mind, and then you're able to just be like, this isn't worth my time. Like, I think it just becomes way more clear. Because if you don't have that, then I would probably just be like, yeah, I can just I'll just mow my lawn today. I can just do this, right?
Yeah.
Because you just have all the free time in the world kind of a thing, or you don't know what you're going towards. So I always try to get laser focused. And I think that there's always, again, we go through these phases where like we all go through them where you're more locked in than other times. So if I'm in a lull where I'm just like not cranking it out, I just don't feel maybe excited, or I feel like I have too many things going on. I hate that feeling. I hate that feeling when there's like 5 projects, 10 projects, like too many things going on and they're all different. That's when I like really try to stop myself, and I'm like, dude, you got to like narrow this down. Like, you are one guy and this has got to get more focused, and it all has to kind of make sense. Because when I'm laser focused, you just know where you're going. And you said earlier about saying no to things, and it's a huge deal. And I don't know if that's always good advice throughout your life. Cause like, I'll tell you why. Like, when I was a little bit younger, I feel like saying yes is probably a good thing when you're like navigating and experiencing things that you're trying to learn what you like, what you enjoy, maybe what you're passionate about. I would say yes to a lot of things because I'm just trying to experiment. I'm just trying to taste things. But I remember going into this year specifically, I always tend to have like a theme going into the new year. Like, I don't really do goals anymore. I kind of do like visions and themes for my year.
You're always good with that. You're good with a long-term focus.
And it kind of happens like naturally. Like, I kind of come into the year and I'm like, all right, this is kind of the mindset shift. And the theme this year was to say no. Because I remember that last year I was saying yes to a lot of events. I was saying yes to go network or see these people or meet them out, which maybe I needed to. But it started to become a little draining where I was like, now I have to say no to opportunities. It's like things were coming and there were opportunities being presented, which is great. But now it's not just about getting the opportunities, about saying yes to the right ones and the ones that align with you. And this alignment thing, I think, is everything. I think it's a huge deal. And the alignment factor, to me, is intuition based. And you were talking about that, getting a little bit more in touch with what that means. And I'm kind of curious to hear your take because I'm huge on this. And I'm trying to learn more about just intuition and gut feel, like really where it comes from, because I'm curious just where this feeling really generates. But I have learned to really lean into that. Of most of my decisions are based off gut feel and intuition, where I talked earlier to you about this law of detachment. And some of that comes from that, where this operating in faith comes in. Like, I'm not so process oriented. Like, I'm not the kind of guy that really like makes a checklist every day and says I'm going to accomplish these 5 things and this is what I'm going to do over 3 months, and so that's going to give me XYZ. Like, I'm way more artistic with it, where I'm really going with the flow and feeling it, but I have a vision to anchor me. But all that is intuition based. So like, if a decision comes around, I'm just like, I'll sit with it and be like, doesn't feel right. Just doesn't line up with me, and I'll let it go, But if it hits and I'm like, this feels like should be in my life, like it's attractive to me, I'm going to run with it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
And I don't know why. I don't know where it comes from. I don't know why it works, but I just have learned to trust it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm someone who lives with chronic anxiety.
Oh, boy.
And so I'll let you know that, and it's not really a diagnosed thing. Like, I've been told, my wife's a social worker. She's like, yeah, you're anxious. And I think a lot of us can say that we have anxiety, and I think that it can kind of live on a spectrum, but I know what extreme anxiety feels like. And I know that, in moments where my extreme anxiety is, I felt it when I used to be a server in the city, when we would be extremely overwhelmed. Usually brunch in New York City. If you want to ever just go into war without ever going to war, work a brunch in any restaurant in New York City. People just feel like no one can make an egg or get their coffee anywhere else in that time. But it was working in a restaurant. It always gave this pit of anxiety, but it was something that was kind of fun, because at the end of the day, at the end of the night, you would end up kind of getting paid. And so you would actually end up getting, a reward for that anxiety. And so I would always feel I wasn't really successful that day, or I wasn't working hard enough, or I wasn't going to make enough money unless I got that pit of anxiety in my stomach. It wasn't healthy. The other times I would say, thinking about certain things like, hey, student loans, I still have those actually. And it's something where like I start to think about money and my anxiety builds. There's certain people in my life I think about, and that anxiety builds. And all of those aren't good things. And so I've been able to discover, okay, as that starts to increase, this isn't a good feeling. I don't want to feel this again. I did appreciate, when I was working in a restaurant, I appreciated that anxiety. I think the financial anxiety is not something that's really good to feel. It is good, I think, to understand like what's good and what's not. But when I start to feel that about a certain situation, I kind of feel that pit of anxiety start to develop. That's my gut instinct. You can define it however you want to, but that's what I start to feel. And then if something in my life comes around and that's not, I'm like, oh, I'm not really feeling that pit of anxiety or that frustration. This might be a good thing. Mm-hmm. So I really try to revolve myself around that. So it really is almost like a literal gut reaction. It's a gut feeling. I actually feel that. And if it's not bringing me joy and bringing me more of that anxiety, I will end up thinking about it. But I think at this point in my life, I've learned to steer away from it. Even if it's something of interest, even if it's something that someone says, this is going to be really good. And I'm hearing you, but I'm feeling this way. I have to. I've already been through this. I'm going to go the other way. Like I have to trust myself.
Yeah, you do.
And it ends up helping me so much now. And I may pass up a really great experience, to be honest with you, but that's okay because now I felt like I know myself better.
Yeah. Well, you have to believe in something. So I think like that is an internal compass. And whatever you believe in, like the spirituality aspect of it, or just like a gut instinct from a collection of experiences, whatever it is, like you got to lean into something, and it hasn't steered right. Everybody say when you start listening to it, it doesn't steer you wrong, right? It puts you in a good path. The only time I've gotten in trouble is going against the gut.
Yeah.
When I've made decisions going against the gut.
What was the worst decision?
Well, I remember, specifically like when I came back from South Africa and I was like debating, I was having this debate of, do I go back to work? Like I was like, do I go back to a normal job? Because I came back to Charlotte, North Carolina. I didn't have a job. I was like, what am I going to do? So I was like, do I go into real estate? Do I do a traditional job, or do I keep going and like try to travel again internationally somewhere else? And I remember trying to go to the traditional route of, all right, I'm going to get a real estate license, or I'm going to open like a gym here and just become like, back into kind of similar to what I was doing before. And I literally got sick. I lost weight. I got sick. I was sick for a month. And every time that I would go against this stuff, like it felt so bad internally.
Yeah.
To where that was a breaking point for me, where I'm like, I'm just not going against the gut again. It just doesn't work out. Like until I go, all right, I know the path that I should be on is this. Trust it. You don't know why, but it feels right. And that's it. And it gives you like a lot of peace of mind. You just feel like you're on the right path. This like anxiety stuff is like obviously a real thing. Like I've had it too, right? I still kind of experience it. The only thing that has helped me with it is more kind of like, I think because I went through some stuff where I had a secure job, lost it, and then I used to freak out. I had tons of anxiety when I quit my job because you don't have the stability anymore. But then because I had that, went through it and figured out like, oh, I can figure it out. Like I'll find a way. It kind of just develops some confidence in you of, all right, you have faith. Like no matter what the world's going to throw at you, you've been at a spot where you had nothing and you figured it out. So what's the world going to do to you, man? You're going to be okay. You're smart enough. And there's this quote of like a bird sitting on a branch doesn't worry about the branch breaking because it has faith in its own wings.
I've always liked that one. That's
a great one, right?
Yeah.
It's just faith in yourself. Whatever is going to happen is going to happen, and you will be able to adapt because you have faith in your abilities and who you are.
Yeah. I actually have the opposite experience in terms of you leaving a job and that being the thing that you struggled with. I struggled with staying in a job for too long. My last job, I was working for someone else's practice, and I stayed there for way too long because I was so afraid to leave. And every time I thought about it, I did have that pit of anxiety in my stomach when I made the decision to stay. But I did because I thought it was the thing to do.
Yeah, I've been there.
And so I needed to trust myself a little bit more in that moment. I felt like I couldn't. I was like, I need a smoother transition out of here. But really, if I cut that branch, and I let that branch fall, I should have let that happen. I needed to. I'm in such a better spot. That was like a little more than like a year and a half ago now. And, my anxiety is less. I have more control in my life. I have a deeper, passionate focus in my life too. So that was a really difficult position that I was in, and so glad that I'm not in it anymore.
That's a hard jump to make, but I think a very necessary one. I've been there too, where you're kind of maybe in a position that, a job that you should have left, but you're there for whatever the reasons may be: comfort, security, familiarity, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But taking that leap is really tough because like you are relying on yourself. And in the beginning, when you do that, I mean, admittedly, it's pretty scary. As I got to tell you, as a man though, like I felt it to be like really necessary. I remember having this conversation with my brother when I was sitting in Charlotte, and I just, I think I was thinking about, this is when I got back from Cape Town. And I remember telling him, and this is something that I just felt so deeply at the time. I have this great job in Charlotte, right? So I have this corporate job. And I remember telling him, I was like, Chris, it feels to me that if I were to stay in Charlotte and get this great condo and have this sales job that I had and have all these things, that I would feel like a fraud inside, that I just felt weak as a person. And I said to him, I'm like, but if I were to go out on my own and do whatever it is I'm supposed to do, because I didn't know at the time, if it was to start my own business or to get into fitness or be a mom, whatever those things are, and I were to go that route and then I were to get the condo because of a byproduct of me doing work I love, I would be really proud of being able to buy that condo because of the work that I did, because I felt it was genuine to who I am and how I express myself. But the reverse, it just didn't feel right. It didn't feel right internally, like I didn't really deserve it because it didn't feel like it belonged to me. And I think that alone, to me, that was enough for me to say no to this and to go down this path. You know what I mean? Because it didn't feel right the other way around. And I'd rather have these things by going on this path that is authentic and true to you and having success be a byproduct, right? Like if money and fame are a byproduct of you doing great work that fulfills you, then great. But if the reverse happens, if you get success, money, and fame just because, I don't know, you're just doing work you don't believe in, I don't think that feels good.
I think it's just good to focus on the other side. What is it that's going to make you feel good? Don't let the idea of it not feeling good be your biggest driver. I think about this with myself too. I love looking back at certain things that I've been able to purchase or do in my life and say, hey, this is what health and nutrition built. Versus, say, I don't know, selling pharmaceuticals or, selling, some equipment that's not going to work or trying to undermine someone, selling someone a bad product. So I don't know, whatever.
Yeah.
But I definitely know what you mean.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was a purchase that you really wanted to make at that time that you would have had the money for, but you feel like would have ended up making you feel kind of guilty or not so happy about?
I think it literally was a condo.
Oh, it was a condo. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was like,
yeah.
I was like, do I buy a place? I was at that place. I've lived in Charlotte for so long. I was like, am I going to buy a place here? And then get into more work and just go, I don't know. Everybody's like, I was just like going to be going to real estate. I don't even know why. Because you make money, right? That's all I was thinking about. I'm going to buy a condo, go into real estate. And, just didn't, but it didn't feel right, dude.
I feel like I would just go into real estate to see the inside of amazing homes. But you know what I'd find? They'd be like, oh yeah, well, welcome to real estate, Ryan. We're going to give you a bunch of these not so great homes. And I'd be like, this is not what I wanted.
This is not right.
I wanted to sell mansions, please. They're like, you got to put your time in. So,
right. There's a process.
Yeah.
So anyways, all this being said, with recovery from work, life balance, boundaries, all this stuff, it's difficult. I think there's an art to it. We're still kind of learning. I'm certainly adapting to this stuff all the time. And when we talk about this, it's so funny because now when we turn it back into like training specifically, how easy it is. I think it's so much easier, right? When we're talking about actually training nutrition recovery, it seems so simple to me in the fact of like, well, if you trained heavy, you go to sleep. Eat some good food and go to sleep.
What do I eat? Doesn't just eat something.
Just eat some good Have a steak.
It does. And it's so exciting to get into the minutia of nutrition and fitness recovery, right? Because the science behind it is really cool. Maybe I'm just speaking personally.
It is, though.
But it really is interesting to understand how the muscle recovers, what's going on during sleep in terms of hormones, releasing growth hormone, releasing testosterone, how that's going to affect things like your anabolic responses. All these things are just so necessary for you to really understand and kind of fit in. But just realize that if we're telling you grams of protein and eat this and lift this one day and then work out this muscle group another, it is the easy stuff. It's the stuff that you can follow. But unless you're happy with everything else around you, you're truly not recovering.
Yeah, this stuff that we talked about today has an impact on your recovery, even from the training side, big time. Because if you're having chronic stress and anxiety, or if you feel like you're being spread so thin in all these other areas of your life, you're not going to recover. Because I've had that too, where you're stressed out from life circumstances. And so I'm getting burned out because I can't recover my training, and then my workouts suffer.
And it's so true, because higher cortisol levels lead to an imbalance in things like blood sugar. Your muscles aren't going to recover from that point. It doesn't matter what you're lifting then.
Or even loss of appetite.
Could be loss of
appetite. So you can't even I don't even have a craving for food.
There's so many things there. So when someone asks me about recovery and they're like, just tell me, it ends up being a lot deeper than that. Yeah. And we can. And very exciting. We are going to bring someone on the podcast.
Yeah.
Joel Totoro, who was actually one of the first sports dietitians in the industry. Sports dietetics is actually a pretty young industry. We've had dietitians for a long time, but dietitians that work specifically within sports, within professional teams, it's a pretty new thing. So Joel was actually one of the first sports dietitians out there, actually getting paid for working with professional athletes, and specifically with the New England Patriots. He made the jump from clinical nutrition, working in a hospital up near Boston, I believe, and started working with the Patriots, which is pretty exciting. He worked his way through there. I think he was there for maybe about 7 years, I'm just guessing. And through his experiences and building his knowledge through that, he found his way to an amazing company, Thorne. Thorne is a supplement research company who does great things, and they put out wonderful products.
Huge fan.
Not just the fact that it can help with performance, but doing it from a scientifically backed, safe way. And that's why we want to be able to talk with him. So actually next week, we are going to have him on so that we can get away from a little bit more of, I think we talked about some amazingly emotional things today, about the things that we have to be vulnerable for, to be able to do a deep dive into ourselves, understand kind of how to recover, who recover well for you, for your life, and exactly who you are. Yep. And now we get to do a little bit of a deeper dive into that scientific side of things.
It's going to be very helpful. Yeah, talking to him when we talked to him on the phone, I think it's going to be a great conversation. So that'll be our next talk, and then we'll kind of close the gap between the two things, the scientific kind of piece of it, and then this outside life factor, the art, I think, of it. So
yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Great stuff today, Ryan. Thanks for the conversation, sir, as always.
Man, of course. Till next time.
All right. See you guys next time.